Okay, we are now moving into our last panel session for today. We've then got one more speech, which just brace yourselves because we're hearing from Scott Reardon, who is an absolute legend. But this year this panel is about Talking 2030, and we've had a change in moderator, Tony from NFF, who you've heard from today. Tony Mahe's going to be managing this panel. So could I please invite Tony, Fiona, Richard, Ben, Jim, Tim and John to the stage, and they're going to be talking about the 2030 agenda and hitting the road, Talking 2030, and what our industry's best and brightest think that we will need to do to accelerate our industry's growth. So welcome the panel.
Thank you very much, Catherine. While our panel gets up here, I'm going to ask you to indulge me for just 30 minutes. You'll see in your program that Bryce Ives was meant to moderate this session, and I'm clearly not Bryce Ives. He's an apology for today. So I'm going to play a bit of devil's advocate, and you just forget for a moment that I'm the CEO of the NFF, and we've launched this document, this $100 billion vision roadmap for farm gate value in the next 12 to 15 years. I'm just going to test out some of the panel, or all of the panel, on the validity. This document, of which you've all got a copy in your show bags. Why do we need it? Why? So the panel can think about that. I'm going to ask them to give a 30-second introduction on themselves, and then we're just going to unpack this roadmap for a $100 billion industry for the next 12 to 15 years. So perhaps a very brief introduction, guys, and then we'll get straight into it.
Hi everybody, my name's Ben Van Delden. I head KPMG's Agri-Food Tech focus and our markets function. Why do we need a roadmap? We want to get there deliberately, not by accident. The 5 countries we looked at in 2016 that are really driving growth at a technology level in agriculture all had a very clear industry strategy, built with government but largely led by industry. So I think there's some lessons to be taken from those that are already achieving more than 100 billion, Tony. So I think, yes, we do definitely need a document that lays out how we're going to get to where we want to be.
Thank you, Ben. Richard?
Richard Heath, I'm the Executive Director of the Australian Farm Institute. I think we absolutely definitely need a roadmap, and I think it should be even more aspirational than $100 billion, to be honest. I think we need something that's the real moonshot, that actually really gives the industry something to galvanise around, that we think, well, we're just not going to achieve this, but unless we try, we won't. We need something that's better than business as usual. We need something that's more than incremental. We've heard just before from Luke talking about the Belt and Road Initiative, and when you start to look at some of the figures involved in that in terms of the amount of trade that's going to be enabled by that, 40% of global trade, trillions and trillions worth of dollars worth of trade. Unless we actually coordinate much more than business as usual to access that opportunity through regional freight hubs, through a move towards high value product, like Ben was saying, that's not going to happen by accident. It actually needs an organised effort to get there, and we really need to think aspirationally to be able to do it.
Terrific. Fiona Simson, President of the NFF. What's going to prevent this from being a dust collector? I mean, really, do we need a plan? How are we going to bring it to life? How's the NFF going to make this happen?
Yeah, look, the exciting thing about this one, Tony, is it's not a dust collector, it's not a bookend, it is a nice little coffee table actually booked. It's got some beautiful photos and things in here. However, what we've actually done is we've actually set targets and we've set metrics for industry around what some of the goals and some of the aspirations that we've put in here. So not only are we enunciating the pillars, not only are we looking at some of the challenges, the headwinds, the tailwinds, not only are we looking at whether they are strengths or opportunities or weaknesses or threats, but we're actually then seeking to measure how we perform and how we might get there. We're setting some targets and some goals in each of those pillars, and then we're actually going to measure how we're going to get there. And Tony, I think we're going to actually check in every year, and there could even be CEO jobs on the line if we don't end up getting there.
Well, I really don't envy the CEO, whoever that guy is. Tim, Telstra, I mean, you've got a strong and long history in rural and regional Australia. I mean, what's a roadmap mean to you? What's it important for you?
Well, I think any business or any industry needs a plan for the future. It's inconceivable that, in a sense, that you wouldn't have one. Also, I'd say that having a roadmap is also not to imply that something's broken. It's also an acknowledgement of the reality that we live in complex times, with all sorts of competing challenges. And I think the lovely thing about this roadmap is its emphasis on collaboration. And I think is when you look around, the ag industry or look around regional communities, it's those locations or it's those industries which have knitted together the coalition of interests to achieve very ambitious goals. And I think it's that sense of, in this roadmap, a genuine ambition, and that's something that we've certainly spoken to the NFF consistently around, the attractiveness of this is its ambition, the energy that it unleashes, and the collaboration it facilitates. And I think, that's why we're very encouraged to be involved.
Terrific, thanks, Tim. John, Agrifutures, if I was a sceptic and I had a few conversations like this around application of R&D and take-up and adoption of R&D, isn't this just adding to the whole plans and nothing actually happens as a result of plans and R&D plans and strategies and things? How, from an Agrifutures point of view, what's your perspective on plans and how we make them happen?
Yeah, look, thanks, Tony. And I guess we've all seen from time to time plans being developed and they end up on bookshelves. And to me, the challenge is not so much producing the document. In some ways, that's the easy part, Tony. The hard part and the important bit is changing the way people think and changing where the plan and where a roadmap can help change people's thinking is getting at least some agreement and some alignment about what we're trying to achieve as a nation. Once you've got that target out there, and we've seen this already with the Minister, for example, buying into the $100 billion target by 2030, once we've got those targets out there, then it really starts people thinking about what's their role in achieving it. And from an R&D point of view, for us, if an industry's got a really clear picture of where it wants to be and why it wants to be there, then it makes it much easier for us to be able to identify the right research and the right innovation to help the industry get there.
From a commercial perspective, Ben, how does that happen for the commercialisation, the adoption of R&D, and what is a KPMG role in that? Stepping back, I mean, you've obviously got some links in the agribusiness sector. What's a consultant's role in this? How do you bring it to life?
Well, I think for us, when we get up in the morning, we're trying to bring confidence to a sector, and that goes back to if you want to become 100 billion, and I totally subscribe to Richard's call. I think we're probably being not as ambitious as we could be at 100 billion. Let's say it's more than that. What do we need to do? We need to attract confidence around to bring capital into this. We've talked in the report about north of $150 billion of extra infrastructure that we need in ag to make that work. So when Telstra are thinking about where would they commit funds, they have to choose agriculture if we want to be a $100 billion industry. We have to help them understand why that would be important. So for us, it's about helping give industry the confidence to invest. And not all of that investment is going to come from the Australian banks and players, Tony. So we need to tell a joined-up story to the world about the potential here in Australia. So a lot of what we're doing is really trying to activate that global network of clients that are interested in not just production in a market like Australia, but actually doing their research here. And why would you do that? Our view is that this is a really difficult market to farm in. And for that reason, it's a really difficult market to run technology in the agri-environment. So if it works here, it will work almost anywhere in the world, which is a really good story to tell. But we just need a joined voice because we're a pretty small market at the bottom of the world. So confidence for capital and then confidence for talent, because we are not going to get to where we want to be with just the capability that currently works in this sector. We have to attract people to come into this exciting sector.
Yeah, certainly agree with you, attracting people. Richard, I want to unpack your thoughts about not being aspirational enough. I've had lots of emails and phone calls and things saying, you're kidding yourself. We're not going to get to 100 billion. What about this drought, and what about all of the other risks of setting such an aspirational target? But you're going the other way.
So we're in a drought now, but look at 2 years ago. we're at 70 billion. So we've already shown how much productivity increase there is in 1 year that we can do with current technology and current systems. We start applying all the new technology that we've got at hand to that $70 billion figure, and immediately we're well on our way towards 100 billion and exceeding 100 billion. I mean, the economic evaluation of the potential of digital agriculture that was done through the P2D project found a potential 25% increase in GVP. Again, you apply that to the 70 billion, and you're getting well there. So no, I think we can realistically be much more ambitious.
Yep. John?
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, we've done a little bit of work that we sponsored with ASL Allen, just looking at if we project forward current growth, if we just project forward how we're currently going, by 2030 we'd probably hit a figure of about $84 billion. So the question, of course, is great having these aspirational targets, and I agree with Richard, it's important that they're stretched, they're not just we're going to get there anyway. But what I think really strikes me is that if we're serious, if that's what we want to do and that's where we want to be, then we're actually going to have to do things a bit differently. There's going to be a need to adopt some of those new technologies that Richard's been working on. There's going to be a need to develop some new higher value industries. There's going to be a need to actually capture more of the value here in Australia rather than exporting low value commodities to hit that target. Now, I guess my main message here is great having the target. We're not going to get there just by doing nothing. And we're not going to just get there by doing what we've currently been doing. We've actually got to do what we're currently doing well, and we've got to do some different things as well.
So I'm going to come to Fiona about some products and things, but just quickly, Tim, the point that John mentioned around tech and technology and telecommunications and digital stuff that we've heard so much about today, it's obviously going to be a critical part.
Yeah, it's an essential part. It's really interesting, this iPhone, I think, is the first iPhone came out 12 years ago, and it's sort of the revolution around mobile technology has been absolutely profound. And if you go to Birdsville now, the quality of the mobile network in Birdsville is as good as you will get at the AFL Grand Final or the NRL Grand Final. And the reason for that is not anything that Telstra did, but a forward-thinking Shire Mayor had this ambition to bring fibre to Birdsville. And he did that by working together with local councils, working together with state governments, ultimately getting funding from the federal government and also from Telstra. And it's the power of that sort of vision and that collaboration that can bring to life the technology. And technology will be absolutely fundamental to achieving this objective. We also need to remind ourselves that, Australians and Australian farmers are early adopters of technology. It's for a reason that the most recent worldwide conference around 5G and setting the standards for the next generation telecommunications was held at the Gold Coast because of the level of innovation, the level of case studies and business cases around 5G. So, we are building on great strengths here in terms of technology, and I think so. And that technology will underpin absolutely the achievement of this vision.
Sure, thanks, Tim. Fiona.
I was just going to say, Tony, I think absolutely critical. We are early adopters. Australians are known for being innovative, for being early adopters, for changing what they do in any case. And I think the exciting thing is that, if I look back on over the 90 years of my own farm, and I've seen how differently we've farmed over the years, not just in terms of the equipment that we use, but also we've completely changed our crops. We've completely changed our cropping cycles. We've completely explored uphill farming and downhill farming and across the contour bank farming. We've looked at water use efficiency. We've changed animals completely. But now that we're in this new phase, this digital disruptive phase, really the sky is the limit. And if we know that if we can unlock some of the benefits, that is going to return huge value to farmers at the farm gate, as well as, of course, coupling that with the growing Asian market right next door, the ability to, instead of just exporting broccoli to our Chinese consumers. It's to turn it into a heat and eat meal and stick it in a passenger belly and take it straight over to, in the passenger plane belly, and take it straight on, not a passenger's belly, I'm sure there's plenty of broccoli consuming people going overseas, a passenger plane belly and travelling overseas. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, but I wanted to say to Richard, I mean, I don't think it's all about the number. I don't think we should get into quibbling about the number, quibbling about whether it's a stretch enough, whether it's too little, too much, too what. We know it's a stretch. $15 billion is not a small amount to stretch. And I think, you know, some of the things that I think are more challenging than thinking about the number is actually some of the measurables and the metrics and the aims that we actually have embedded in the pillars. And I think it's a really interesting discussion, some of those metrics, and are we going to get there? Are they aspirational enough? It's something we struggled with as we travelled around the countryside and talked around the roundtables. The people who came to those roundtables were really passionate and optimistic about Australian agriculture, but they didn't want to take any prisoners. They really wanted to put it out there. They wanted us to do a really great job at what we do, and they wanted some of these targets in here that I think really are stretch targets around whether it's climate change, whether it's about the farm fatalities, you know, 0 farm fatalities. I mean, that's taking it on the chin. That's a really holistic, good aim for our farming sector. So I think I'm more worried about, and I think some of those targets are, to me, the interesting part of this plan, rather than worrying too much about whether it's 100, whether it's 120, 150, whether it should be in 90, whatever it is.
Before you respond, Richard, I'm going to go to the audience for some questions. So those of you that have got some questions on this roadmap for a $100 billion industry, get your hands ready. Richard, do you just want to respond to?
I agree, Fiona, and I'm not too hung up on the number either. It is a nice round number, and it's very easy to get your tongue around. I think what I'm more talking about is some sort of message, and sometimes the message is a number that just really makes people stand up and notice and galvanises change. So you can talk about numbers. One of the numbers that is often referenced is the $1 billion that Monsanto paid for Climate Corp a few years ago, you know, which was the start of the real sort of understanding of the value of data and the value of ag tech. And it was purely that number. That was such a sort of easy to understand number for everyone, $1 billion, that started to generate the hype and build interest in the entire environment. Now, to really achieve substantial growth for agriculture, it needs to get outside of the industry. It needs, you know, massive government policy support. It needs the whole supply chain working towards it. It needs Australia understanding what that opportunity is. And, you know, for that, we need something that everyone can get their head around. Okay, this is really significant. This is something that it will make a real difference to our country if we all grab hold of this and move forward with it.
Yeah.
All right. I've got a couple of questions myself, but I can see a few hands up in the audience. I can see Ollie down here, down the front.
Thanks, Tony. My question, Tim, is for you. So at our Warrigal roundtable, we discussed not only connectivity to the farm, but across the whole farm to enable that data capture and storage. If we're waiting till 2030 to get adequate connectivity to the farm, how do we expect to unlock that $20.3 billion of value that there is in data storage and capture?
Yeah, it's a great question, Ollie. At the heart of that is the conundrum of geography. So if you think about Australia, it's about 7.5 million square kilometres. The Telstra mobile network is about 2.6, 2.7 million square kilometres, so roughly about a third of the country. And with that third, we capture 99.4% of the population. So you've roughly got 0.6 in the other 2/3. So how do we find ways to deliver the coverage that's required? I think there's two key things here. One is around investment and being clever with investment, and I spoke earlier around the game-changing nature of co-investment, of crowdsourcing capital that can come together. And, you know, the satellite small cells, I think, is a great example. 18 months ago, to put coverage on a farm that had no coverage whatsoever, you're relying on a mobile tower. And the big cost associated with the mobile tower is the fibre backhaul. That's the cost. Now we can put one of those satellite small cells on a farm for $70,000 and we'll go halves. 35 for the farmer, 35 from Telstra. And that's just one illustration of the level of technology innovation. With our network around the IoT network, we've been able to reach out beyond that 2.5 square kilometres and get another 20% around with new technology for IoT. So it is a challenge, you know, an unambiguous challenge, but I think with the right level of investment, particularly co-investment, really trying to leverage the new technologies, and thirdly, to have those regulatory settings that genuinely reward the investment in these sorts of areas is the three legs of the stool to achieve what you're after.
Terrific. Thanks, Tim. I think Nick Keating, you've got a question there. There's a microphone just coming up behind you.
Thanks, Tony. My question is, it's very well to have goals, but you need insurance and you need infrastructure to going forward to Australia. Now, I'll just give a couple of examples. We've never done a proper soil audit in Australia. Now, our best soils could be at Burke or Horsham or Claremont in Queensland. Now, if they're our best soils, why don't we take water get water to the best soils in Australia? Now, Mr. Pratt this morning said he can take water anywhere in a plastic line. His father said it 20 years ago, and we still haven't taken that technology on. Now, I'll just give you one example about water. At our local area, Jugagong, they pump water over a 1,500-foot hill and then take it to 30 towns and villages right out to Lake Gajeligo in New South Wales, also giving water to farmers on its way. Now, why don't we have the same thing up 10 times going up the east coast of Australia and down to Victoria into Queensland, also so people have got security of water going forward. Now, there's plenty of ways that we can ensure our droughts, and we don't do it. But I believe that we need infrastructure and insurance going forward to make us to reach our goals of 100 billion at plus.
Thanks, Nick. Fiona?
Look, I don't think any of us disagree, Nick. I think all of those things are possible in this roadmap and easily to develop. I think if you have a look at page 20, for example, some of the growing sustainably goals, it's just something that I've opened up to now. It talks about advocating for infrastructure projects using productive water. It talks about using it sustainable. It talks about efficiencies and how we can do that. So look, I think that discussion is live through the pages of this book. It gives us a plan, it gives us somewhere to aim that conversation and base that conversation. I mean, I think one of the aims of this document is to get out of the politics of some of the decisions and some of the way that the politics has taken over some of the discussions around whether it's water, whether it's dams, whether it's renewable energy. Any of those things are at the moment mostly had through a political lens. And the people that suffer are the regional and rural communities, are the farmers, are the people that actually need these discussions in the community to occur and need them to occur in a really balanced way. Now, because they're had through a political lens, because we all are urged to take sides, because we have to be pro-dams or anti-dams or pro-pipes or anti-pipes or pro-renewables or anti-this, then nothing happens. And I think we wanted to take, this is industry's view, we want some very sensible discussions and plans, and we've got some targets in here that can encompass any of that thinking that we can drive, but it's done through a lens of productivity and profitability for the agricultural industry, not a political lens. And I think that's the important thing. Our aim for this document is that it will be endorsed bipartisan. It will be a bipartisan endorsement. It will have, no matter who's the Prime Minister or who's the Ag Minister or who's the government, there will be things in here that each government can get behind, so we don't get distracted by another different ag paper. We want a whole of government agricultural strategy that can encompass that sort of thinking that you're talking about in there.
John, one.
So that's why we've given them a guide to help them, Nick. If they can't do it on their own, we have to help them.
John, you had a quick comment. I know there was another question out in the audience.
Yeah, just probably an observation on the question. I know, Ben, you've seen a lot of countries around the world doing different things in agriculture. I've had the privilege of being to a few countries, Israel, New Zealand, US. What strikes me is some of the countries that have a really coherent direction are the countries where government and industry work hand in glove. To me, Israel, when you go to Israel and you talk to the agri-tech community, it doesn't matter if you talk to a government rep or if you talk to a researcher or an agri-tech, doesn't matter who you talk to, it's like they've all been given the same hymn sheet, it's almost word for word about what their role is, what they're trying to achieve, why they're the best in the world at what they do. New Zealand's not far off, 100% pure New Zealand. When you go over and talk to the New Zealanders, whether you're talking to a government official or whether you're talking to, Rocket Plus, agri-tech startup, or whether you're talking to one of the Crown Institutes, they've got a picture of what they want to be and what their competitive advantage is and what their positioning is in the world and what they're going to be the best in the world at. And to me, this is really important, because if we want to be the best at what we can be, then it's going to require industry and government, and I mean both, buying into the same roadmap, the same direction, the same goals and the same vision. Because then when you've got to make these hard decisions about do you put infrastructure into dugong into water versus something else, we're all on the same page.
Fiona, I'm going to come back to you and wrap up that question in a minute, but Ben, comment?
Yeah, and good link, John. When you think about Israel, they recycle 80% of their water. So when you think about New Zealand and the 100% pure, the other tagline that New Zealand's come out with is pest-free by 2050. And pest-free and 80% water recycling are actually innovating around the problem. And I think that's where countries that have really got their act together around the agri sector have focused on what are the issues and been really consistent and clear about that, because that drives the right research, drives the right investment, but it also, and this is a learning from the Netherlands, starts to get businesses talking about co-investment. So we shouldn't wait for handouts. It's not about government building infrastructure. It's actually about industry also being prepared to invest, and not just for their own farm, but actually collectively, because we've got to compete on the quality of our products, not on the infrastructure we've had to invest to get a product in the first place.
So Fiona, just before I go to the question in the crowd, I mean, you mentioned bipartisan support for agriculture. In the current political climate, I mean, how realistic is it for a government to actually take up a plan and stick with this plan, and more so for an alternative government to stick with a plan? I mean, how are we going to get government to commit to this?
Well, I think it's tough, Tony, particularly what we're seeing now in terms of our decision-making processes. We go from election to election, election cycle to election cycle. However, I think in the current, and I think our idea definitely is that this document is not just a Department of Agriculture document, it's a whole of government strategic plan, because the agricultural industry of the future and the agricultural industry today is about much more than just the Department of Agriculture, to be honest. It's about technology, it's about innovation, it's about sustainability, it's about all leadership, it's about all these things. And so I think as industry, if we keep the politics out of the discussion and we approach it in an apolitical fashion, and we approach it as being, this is an industry position, this is what we want government to support, of whatever colour, of whatever persuasion. There'll be some tinkering around the edges perhaps, but I think, and you'd expect that with the democracy that we have. But I think the actual roadmap that it is, we have to ask government that it stays non-political. Agriculture is a really important industry to Australia, and it's about food and fibre. We know that there's some of the opportunities ahead. It's too important for us to get politicised. We can't change tack too quickly. We need to be focused on the goal. We need government to help us and work hand in glove with them. And I think that's what we just have to keep trying to pursue that, Tony. Although I think it's going to be hard.
Question in the audience.
Hi, Gemma Stefano from AFIA, the Australian Fodder Industry Association. I want to ask a question relating to what Fiona spoke about, which is the pillars of the roadmap. I notice that there's one to achieve gender parity in the agricultural workforce and double the number of women in management roles. I want to ask this question to everyone but Fiona on the panel as to what they are doing and what we do need to do in future to achieve this.
Sure. Do you want to start down the end, John?
Yeah, no worries. Well, firstly, can I just say, great to get a question from somebody from the export fodder industry, one of Agrifutures industry. We're very proud of all the industries we work with, so great to have you here. It's a really good question, and I think there's a mood of change there. Just looking at the stats, like since 2006, we've had more female enrolled in agriculture and agriculture-related degrees than we've had males. We recently ran a whole series of workshops across Australia targeting emerging leaders. 150 people turned up, 70% were female in that emerging leaders group. So there is definitely a sea change, and us old blokes should be worried.
So that whole area of gender parity has been a significant focus for Telstra over many years. I'm just really delighted that the person heading up our whole agri work in the organisation is Alana Mycock, who's here, who's a female. Marnie McHugh from my team, who heads up the Rural and Regional Affairs team, is a female executive. As an organisation, we've got loads of work to do, but I think there's genuine momentum in this area.
Richard.
The AFI has a staff of 7 and I'm the only male. So, look, no, so our board is 50-50 gender balance, and we have a policy with the AFI for the events that we run that all our speakers, we have a 50-50 gender balance as well. I think, I just want to extend the question a little bit. I think what we're still bad at, and I'd like our organisation to be better in, is diversity beyond gender diversity, and I don't know that we pull people from outside of the industry, from other cultures, to get even more diverse than just gender diverse.
Quick response, please.
So I'm lucky enough to work for an organisation whose most senior role in our business is a woman. So I guess diversity is something that's driven from the top down from our chairwoman. In our own consulting practice in agriculture and food, the majority of the team are women, and they are taking us to places with their diverse thinking that I think has been a big part of our growth. But I think the super exciting thing about technology entering agriculture is that, and you've seen it on stage today, some of our most successful founders of ag tech businesses are women. And I think that's because women take a different approach to problem solving. And it's really successful in a technology environment, especially where technology is going to overcome the more brawn approach to solving a problem. So we should be really proud not only of the quality of ag tech businesses we've got in Australia that are taking on the world, but for the fact that most of those that are taking on the world are led by females. So I think it's a really exciting industry for us to be in. We should embrace the technology side, because with that brings greater opportunities for diversity.
Thank you, Ben. Is there any other questions in the audience? I see a hand up over here. If we could just get a microphone, that would be great.
One up the back, Tony, on the left corner.
Any others?
One up the back left.
Oh, okay, we've got one more. So we're running out of time. We're going to have to make them short questions and short answers.
Maarten Stapler, Farming Systems Agronomist, Regenerative Farming Consultant, Independent. My question is, like, as an immigrant to Australia, but I'm an Aussie, like the fragmentation, the 6 states, 2 territories, 15 R&D corporations, what is that doing to the roadmap? Because to me that's the biggest block. If you look at New Zealand, Israel, the Netherlands, far more unified pictures because there are not that many players in charge.
All right, I'm going to ask John to answer that question, and
yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a good question, but to be honest, I think you're actually asking a Dorothy Dixer, because if you have got a vision and you have got a strategy, you're never ever going to have one person or one organisation controlling everything, and if you did, it would be a disaster. But if you do have a shared vision and you do have a shared roadmap, and it helps people to know what their role is and how they contribute. And once you get that defined, then it's very easy to collaborate, because you know what you're bringing to the table and you know what you want from your collaborators. So to me, that issue you raised, Martin, is a really important one, and it's exactly why we need government working in harmony with industry, working in harmony with the 15 RDCs, working in harmony with all of the states, all working on achieving exactly the same outcome for the nation.
Very good. One final
can
question.
I just make just a really quick comment?
Quick
just really quick. I'd really like to pay credit to the Rural R&D for Profit program, which I think deserves, it's been really influential in getting the RDCs in particular to collaborate and work together and realise that the world doesn't fall apart if we can actually work together. So I think there's been some really encouraging signs in recent times that we're seeing more collaboration than we have before.
Page
Thank you,
23,
Richard.
Tony. Page 23. Page 23, unlocking innovation. When we went out to the roundtables, everything was on the table. This talks about efficient R&D. R&D is incredibly important to us. We need to continually looking, but it goes strategy then structure. So we need to be continually looking and making sure that what we have delivers. Sorry, Tony.
Perfect. Thank you. One final question.
Hi, Tony. Paul Fox is my name. I'm from Agrinomics Australia. We're setting up an air freight network exclusively for the agricultural sector. My background's aviation, so I want to say two things.
You have to be quick.
One, congratulations on the roadmap. I think it's critical. The second thing is that our observations are that one of the major barriers to growth is going to be air freight and freight infrastructure generally. I'm just here to put my hand up and say, how can we help? We're looking to invest significant money. We want to partner with the industry. This is my first National Farmers Federation conference, and I really just want to say, how can I help you?
Terrific. All right, thank you. I'll take that as an invitation rather than a question, perhaps, to keep talking.
Correct.
Thank you. Look, we're running out of time. I know Maz is about to hit me over the head, but okay. Can I just commend this document to you? It is a plan. I wish the NFF and whoever's responsible for reporting on that a lot of luck in reporting on that. Can you join with me in thanking the panel, please?
Well done. Well, that was a cracking last panel for the day, wasn't it? I think there's a few key messages that I got. One, Tony, your job's on the line, CEO. Secondly, I think if we're talking about technology, Fiona's nailed it with putting meals in people's bellies to take them to Asia. And what I really loved, Tim, when he showed his phone, had a road on it. Did anyone else notice that? I just thought that was a nice poetic little, we're on the road to now, we know, because we have the 2030 vision. Some of the things that I pulled was that if you ever want to get anywhere, you have to get there deliberately and not by accident. There was also mention of the fact that we need to set targets and metrics, but that's all great. We can all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, but we need to measure them. That's where Tony's job was semi-threatened. Just joking. We need to... Another thing that the plan is really important for is because it gives us confidence in investment. It also helps people outside the industry that could influence the industry know where we're going. So they actually know how to invest, know where we are actually trying to head. I think it's also really important in that context because not only in Australia, it helps global investors understand where we're going, what our vision for the industry is, and R&D is going to be also a really important part of that. So it helps to semi-inform R&D where our priorities need to be to make the most bang for our buck. So I thought that was a fantastic panel and a really good insight into the vision document for 2030.